So we're all just sitting at the dinner table, right? Nothing special, just a normal night, normal food, normal conversation. My dad's talking about work, my mom's asking random questions, and my sister is just scrolling on her phone like she always does. I'm barely even paying attention. And then completely out of nowhere, my mom goes, super casually like she's talking about the weather, "Oh, by the way, your sister's going to be moving in with you." I actually stopped eating. Like fork in the air, frozen, I thought I misheard her. I even laughed a little because it sounded like a joke, but nobody else was laughing. My dad just nodded like this was already decided, and my sister didn't even look up like she already knew. And that's when it hit me, they were serious. Now here's the thing, you don't understand how weird that is unless you know how me and my sister are. We don't just not get along, we avoid each other. We've had arguments over the smallest things, and somehow they always turn into something way bigger. We're complete opposites in basically every way, habits, personality, everything. So the idea of us living under the same roof, yeah, that's not just uncomfortable, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And the craziest part, nobody asked me. There was no discussion, no, "Hey, would you be okay with this?" It was just decided, like my apartment, my space, my life, none of that mattered. I remember just sitting there thinking, is this actually happening right now? I tried to play it off at first. I was like, "Wait, you're serious?" hoping someone would finally laugh and say it was a joke, but they didn't. My mom just kept eating and said, "It'll only be for a while," in that tone that makes you realize it's definitely not going to be just a while. And my dad added, "It makes the most sense, that's it." That was the whole explanation, but what really got me was my sister. She still hadn't said anything, no eye contact, no reaction, nothing. And that's when I started realizing there's a reason behind this, something they're not telling me, because there is no way they would just decide this out of nowhere unless something happened. And trust me, when I finally found out the real reason she needed to move in, everything got a lot more complicated than I expected. For the rest of that dinner, everything just felt off. The conversation kept going like nothing had happened, but I couldn't focus on anything anymore. My mind was stuck on that one sentence, asterisk, "she's moving in with you." I kept replaying it, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out why no one thought this needed a proper discussion. Every now and then I'd glance over at my sister, expecting her to say something, anything, but she just stayed quiet, picking at her food like she wasn't even part of the conversation. As soon as dinner ended, I didn't even wait. I followed my parents into the kitchen and asked them straight up, "What is going on?" And instead of giving me a clear answer, they did that thing parents do where they try to soften everything. My mom said it's just temporary again, and my dad added, "She just needs a little help right now." That was it, no details, no explanation, just vague answers that somehow made it feel even worse. I wasn't buying it. I mean, people don't just move out of their place and into someone else's apartment for no reason, especially not her. My sister was always the independent one, the one who wanted her own space, her own life, her own rules. If she was agreeing to move in with me of all people, something had to be seriously wrong. So I went straight to her. She was in her room, packing. That alone was enough to confirm this wasn't some random idea, they'd already planned it. I stood there for a second, watching her fold clothes into a suitcase like this was completely normal. Finally, I just said, "You're really moving in with me." She didn't even look surprised that I was there. She just sighed and said, "Yeah." I don't really have a choice. That answer hit differently, not defensive, not sarcastic, just tired. I asked her what happened, and at first she didn't want to say anything. She kept brushing it off, saying it wasn't a big deal, that it would only be for a short time. But the more I stood there, the more it became obvious she was avoiding the truth. And eventually she just stopped what she was doing, sat down, and told me she'd lost her job. Apparently it hadn't been sudden. Things had been going downhill for a while, and she just didn't tell anyone. She thought she'd figure it out on her own, find something else quickly, and no one would even notice. But that didn't happen. Bills started piling up, rent became impossible to manage, and then, to make things worse, she and her roommate had a huge falling out. Like, bad enough that staying there wasn't even an option anymore. So in the span of a couple weeks, she went from having everything under control to having nowhere to go. Hearing all that, I didn't really know how to react. Part of me still felt frustrated, like, why didn't anyone tell me this before just deciding for me? But at the same time, it was the first time I'd seen her like that, not arguing, not defensive, not trying to prove a point, just overwhelmed. I told her she could have at least talked to me first, and she just shrugged and said, "Would it have changed anything?" And honestly, I didn't have a good answer for that. A few days later, she moved in, and just like I expected, the first few days were awkward, really awkward. It felt like having a stranger in my space. We were constantly trying not to get in each other's way, but somehow always ending up in the same place at the same time. Little things started to get annoying fast, her leaving stuff around, using my things without asking, playing music when I was trying to relax, and I'm sure I wasn't exactly easy to live with either. At first, we tried to keep things polite, short conversations, basic communication, nothing too deep, but that didn't last long. It never does with us. The first real argument happened over something stupid. I don't even remember what it was exactly, something about dishes or cleaning, but it escalated way too quickly. Suddenly, it wasn't about that anymore. It turned into all the old stuff, all the things we never actually resolved. Old arguments, old frustrations, everything came back out. And for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed, like we were right back where we always were, but then something different happened. Instead of firing back like she normally would, she just stopped. She didn't argue, didn't interrupt, didn't try to win. She just stood there and listened. And when I finished, she didn't get angry. She just said, "I know I'm making things harder for you." That caught me off guard completely, because that wasn't how our arguments usually went. There was no sarcasm, no attitude, just honesty. And for the first time, I started to see things a little differently. This wasn't just some annoying situation being forced on me. She was dealing with something way bigger than I realized. After that, things didn't magically become perfect, but they started to shift. We talked more. Not just surface-level stuff, but actual conversations. She told me about how stressful everything had been, how she felt like she failed, how hard it was to ask for help. And I told her how frustrated I'd been, how it felt like my space was taken away without warning. Somewhere in the middle of all that, the tension started to fade. We still had our moments, of course. Living together wasn't suddenly easy, but it wasn't the disaster I thought it would be either. Slowly, we started figuring out how to coexist. Setting boundaries, respecting each other's space, even joking around sometimes, something we hadn't really done in a long time. And the weirdest part. I realized I didn't actually know her as well as I thought I did, not the version of her now, at least. Looking back at it now, it's kind of crazy how one random sentence at dinner completely changed everything. At the time, it felt like something was being forced on me, like I had no control over my own space or my own life. And yeah, I'm not going to pretend it was easy, it was. There were awkward days, frustrating moments, and times where I genuinely questioned how this was ever supposed to work. But somewhere along the way, things shifted in a way I didn't expect. She didn't just stay for a bit and leave right away. It actually took time for her to figure things out, finding a new job, getting back on her feet, rebuilding her confidence. And during that time, we kind of adjusted. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough to where it stopped feeling like an invasion and started feeling normal. Not the old normal we had growing up, but something new. We started doing small things together without even thinking about it. Watching something at night, arguing over what to eat, sharing random updates about our day. Nothing big, nothing dramatic, but those little moments added up. And before I realized it, the tension that used to define our relationship just wasn't there in the same way anymore. I think the biggest thing I learned is that people change, even the ones you think you already understand. I had this fixed idea of who my sister was based on years of arguments and differences, and I never really gave myself a chance to see her any other way, but living together forced that. It forced conversations we would have never had otherwise, and it showed me a side of her I probably would have never seen if this whole situation didn't happen. Eventually, she did move out. Not in a rushed, stressful way like before, but on her own terms this time, and when she left, it didn't feel like relief, it actually felt kind of quiet, like something was missing. We're still not perfect, we still disagree, we still have our moments, but it's different now. There's understanding there that wasn't there before. So yeah, if you had asked me that night at dinner if I wanted my sister to move in with me, I would have said no without even thinking. But now, I'm not so sure I'd give the same answer. And honestly, it makes me wonder, if you were in my position, would you have handled it any differently?